first one on probability. When we're working with probability, it's important to know what it is. Whenever you hear, what's the probability of something happening? Like, what's the probability it's actually going to snow for a change? What we're talking about is we want to know, what's the likelihood of an event occurring? Down here in Albuquerque, the likelihood of snow occurring is pretty much 0. Maybe up there, wherever you are, it could be a little bit higher. So when we're talking about probability, probability uses a scale from 0 to 1. If you see a probability of 0, that means the event is impossible. It cannot happen. An example of this is if we have a 6-sided die, we know that a dice has the numbers 1 through 6. So if I want to know what's the probability of rolling a 7, we would say that probability is 0 or impossible because there is no 7 on the dice. On the other end of the spectrum is a probability of 1. A probability of 1 means that it's absolutely going to happen. It has to. An example of that could still be with our dice over here. If I say, what's the probability of rolling a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, we know what's going to happen. It has to, because those are the 6 numbers on a dice. So a certain event is something where no matter what you do, you're going to get it. A 50-50 chance is one that could happen. It's not impossible, but it's not certain. This is where we always talk about our flipping coins. When you flip a coin, you're either going to get a heads or a tails. So we know it's a 50% chance of getting a heads or a 50% chance of getting a tail. In between, we have other terms. We could say it's likely or probable. This one is not likely. So if I have a probability between 0 and 0.5, it's most likely not going to happen. If I have a probability between 0.5 and 1, like 0.75, that's a much higher chance and it's likely going to happen. It's more probable. It doesn't mean it will happen, but our chances are higher. So it's important to be able to know where on the scale you are looking at. The next important thing to know is that probabilities can be written as a fraction, a decimal, or a percent. This is because all 3 of these mean the same thing. They just look different. So for example, in that last thing, I had written 0.5, but I actually tended to say 50%. This is because the 2 things are interchangeable. Remember to go from a decimal to a percent. You multiply by 100 because percents are out of 100. To go from a fraction to a decimal, you do the numerator divided by the denominator. So down here, 4 divided by 10, that would give you 4/10, and 4/10 times 100 would give you your 40%. So it's important to be able to recognize when things are equal so that you know if they're giving you the correct fraction, decimal, or percent. The next thing is to calculate a probability. Probabilities are based on outcomes. Outcomes are the possibilities. So back to our 6-sided dice, with the numbers 1 through 6, there are 6 outcomes. You could get a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6. When we flip a coin, there's 2 outcomes. It's either going to be a head or a tail. Maybe if we're spinning a spinner, and that spinner is broken up into sections, on this spinner of mine, I have 4 outcomes because there's 4 sections. Now that I know how to find outcomes, we can look at probability. Probability is the number of desired outcomes, or what you want to happen, over the total possibility. So if I spin this dice, my probability of rolling a 2, I would say there's 6 possible outcomes, so I know it's over 6. And there is exactly 1, 2, so my probability of rolling a 2 is 1 out of 6. On my spinner, if I say the probability of spinning a 3 or a 4, I would first look at my spinner and say there's 4 sections, so the total outcomes is 4. And then if I want a 3 or a 4, those are right there. That's 2 options, so 2 over 4, or 1/2. And then of course we could put it as a decimal or a percent also. The last thing you need to know in this section is you need to know what a complement is. A complement is all of the other outcomes except the one that you actually want. So for example, back to my dice, if I wanted a probability of rolling a 2, we said that was 1/6. So that means the complement is everything other than a 2. So that's rolling a 1, 3, 4, 5, or 6. That means the complementary probability is 5 over 6. So whenever it says complement, it's the other options other than the one you want. And if you notice here, 1/6 plus 5/6, if we add that up, that adds up to 6/6 or 1. So the complement always has to add up to 1. So if we do another, the probability of rolling a 4, just like the 2, is 1/6, so the complement is 5/6. Hopefully this helps you on the lesson. This lesson mainly is going to have finding complements and finding basic probabilities, along with being able to use this scale to identify if something is impossible, not likely, a maybe, a likely or probable, or a certain. Thanks for watching.